Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio Podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada.
That's awesome. Oh, so Derek, I'm introducing you to Taylor right now with One Farm, and very highly educated, as I explained, on CBD, and I've been working with them a bit right now. I love the product because it's one of the few fully organic products. So I think the reason why I wanted to bring Taylor on today was to first do like a CBD 101, because I think there's so much misconception on what CBD is, what it does. Immediately, I was telling someone that we're doing this podcast and they're like, oh, am I going to get high if I listen to it? I'm like, yeah, but it's not. It's like people are so off kilter when I think you were the one that passed that joke.
No, I go for runs around the park, and there's people smoking weed at the park, and I'm like, and I'm taking it in as I'm running. I'm like, no, this is not good. So
yes. Well, especially when you're running. But Taylor, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be on this call with you guys.
Super pumped. So I think what I want to start out with here is the the simplified version of what is CBD. Like, what is, there's been a craze, I feel like, for at least a decade right now, but what is CBD supposed to do? What are people saying it's doing? What is it doing? Like, are you following? Because I know there's specific claims that we can't make because research isn't completely conclusive yet. But what is CBD? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, and so before I get into this, I just want to make a little disclaimer that throughout this call, anything that I'm discussing, I don't intend it to be portrayed as medical advice or making claims. I'm not a doctor, a physician. I'm not a healthcare professional.
Sure.
I'm just somebody who's been in the space for quite a while, and I have quite a bit of experience in academia on the research side of things as well.
Sure.
So I'm really just sharing my collective experience and knowledge.
Absolutely. We will make sure to include that in. Dr. Derek, do not cut that out.
no, that's all right.
Part of it.
So with that being said, CBD cannabidiol is a compound that is produced naturally in the cannabis plant. Within cannabis, marijuana, colloquially known as hemp on the CBD side specifically, these compounds are produced naturally within this plant. Traditionally, most people are familiar with, and have been for decades, more familiar with THC, of course, and this other compound, CBD, which is typically viewed as the more therapeutic of the two compounds, has been ignored, and even people haven't even been aware of this compound for a long time. And so, but it's been present in the plant, just as long as THC has. And so CBD is, something that, when you take it, it doesn't give you the same experience as THC does. Not even, it's the complete opposite experience. THC, everybody knows about THC, right? THC gives you that high, it gives you the munchies, it makes you go to sleep, it makes you want to go to sleep. I mean, all this type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
CBD doesn't really do any of that stuff. CBD is something that you take it and you don't really feel much physically, and every individual's experience varies, of course, based on their own genetics, their own, whatever their own motivations are for taking it, I suppose. Most people, when they take CBD, they're taking it for three main indications. One is to treat pain, so for pain relief. One is for anxiety relief, and the other is for as a sleep aid.
Mm.
And within those three indications, depending on the individual, depending on the severity of what their symptoms, um, they will have a range of success, I suppose, with CBD. CBD is not meant to be it's kind of become in vogue in the media of late, and I think it's easily misconstrued sometimes as this miracle drug, this miracle compound, this miracle plant, which in some cases can be true, in specific instances. But generally speaking, CBD is really meant to act as something that you just incorporate into your daily routine, into your daily life. And it's meant to just improve your quality of life in whatever in certain ways.
Right. And what's interesting about it is you said people typically take CBD for three reasons:
Right.
sleep, anxiety, and to treat pain. But now it seems like, and I know the research is still it's not, what am I trying to say? It's not conclusive yet, right? But people are starting to take this as more of a maintenance, recovery, kind of a wellness protocol now. I've been playing around with it for a couple of months now. I mean, I've used it in the past. There was a patch that I used in the past that I thought worked really well. Started using a cream by One Farm, which has turmeric in it, which I actually love. And it's something we're just on sore muscles in general, I'm rubbing that into. But I'm also noticing now that there's specific powders that are out. Like there's this mushroom CBD powder that I would always take mushroom. I would take a 4-sigmatic mushroom, and now I'm finding it with CBD in it, and I'm using that as almost like my wake up protocol. It's part of this whole wellness package that I try and get myself on it. And I'm starting to notice a difference. Like I'm out at the point now where I'm like, oh my God, this is 100% life changing, but I just started this protocol. So now I'm starting to feel like, yeah, you know what? Body's feeling a little bit more recovered every day. And
Right.
things are starting to go on with my skin that I'm noticing that I'm happy about. I'm 43 now. So, you're starting to notice specific things, but I'm starting to notice that you can use this as part of a wellness package. This doesn't have to be something that you take because we are trying to find some help.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's a great point. I think the broadest application for CBD is for something exactly like what you just described, in that it's in the pain relief application in particular. It's very effective in mitigating inflammation, as well as treating things like neuropathic pain or nerve pain. And so for somebody who works out all the time or plays sports every day, or, just does a lot of heavy, strenuous physical activity on a daily basis, things like a CBD topical, or taking a tincture, or incorporating something like the mushroom powder, can be very, very beneficial for that individual in the long term. And what's nice about it is it's not, you don't have to necessarily worry about any long-term negative effects. You don't have to worry about, like in the example of Tylenol, acetaminophen. You don't have to worry about, oh, acetaminophen, I think you can only take 1,000 milligrams of that safely a day, something like that. These are concerns that you don't really have to be worried about with CBD. And so there's a lot of freedom to kind of experiment, I guess, with what works for you ultimately.
Derek, anything?
Yeah. because I'm going to lighten things up a little bit here, but because Don and I have been talking about vinyl records, I thought the best one to bring up right now when we're talking THC and CBD is Run DMC. So that's my promo for vinyl of the week, Don. Run DMC. I don't have any
those who
TL.
were
I didn't
lighting
never
it
listen.
up.
Yeah, never listened to TLC. Sorry.
No, I like TLC. They were good.
But my question is around like just general efficacy of different products. Like I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different things coming out, startups, and I know people who are getting involved in it. And I hear different things around like, oh, this really works. And then you hear from somebody else says, I tried it, didn't make any difference. So is there differences and maybe there's research around it between like, you know, the efficacy of one type of product or something that you rub on versus something you take orally, or what can we learn about that? And is it dosage dependent? Because I hear a lot of variability on results.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and you know, I think it's you know, it should be noted that you know this issue at large is obviously extremely complex, and would require much more amount of time than we've got on this call here today. But to answer your question, generally speaking, yes, not all products are created equally. Not all CBD, specifically CBD products, are created equally. Not all CBD products, if you compare one tincture that's 1,000 milligrams to another tincture that's 1,000 milligrams, those two products aren't even created equally potentially. And that kind of, you know, broaches the topic a little bit of this concept of, you know, what type of CBD are you actually ingesting? You know, within the space, there are really three terms that get thrown around quite a bit, talking about what type of CBD is in whatever product you're looking at, and that is something like full spectrum, a full spectrum product, and then there's broad spectrum, and then there's isolate. And,
What does that mean?
And so with the full spectrum products, you've got CBD with THC, with some small amounts of some THC in there, as well as other cannabinoids, because you know, and again, stop me if this is getting a little too deep for this context, but
No, this is great.
yeah. So you know, within the cannabis plant, it's not just THC and CBD that we're interested in. There are dozens of other cannabinoids that are relevant to, from a therapeutic perspective, that are present in various cannabis products. And so, you know, what we, you know, when I say we in the industry, we in academia, you know, we, you know, what we find is that a product that contains more cannabinoids, not just one specifically, not just THC and nothing else, or not just CBD and nothing else, but a product that contains an entire suite of cannabinoids, tends to be the most effective from a therapeutic perspective. And so that's what a full spectrum product is considered. Now, if we step to something like broad spectrum is typically a product that contains mainly CBD, specifically has the THC removed out of it. And so there's below detectable levels. I don't want to say, I'm always hesitant to say that there's zero, you know, absolutely zero THC in a broad spectrum product, because that's just not true, even though people will try to convince you otherwise. But it has been removed to the point where it's irrelevant to the discussion. But there are still trace amounts of other cannabinoids in a broad spectrum product. And so that is, you know, relevant for people who are still interested in CBD, interested in what CBD can do for that individual, but also need to be concerned about THC. Maybe they have a job where they get drug tested, or maybe they are just afraid of THC, or whatever their individual reasons may be. that they would be looking to avoid THC specifically, that's something that maybe is more relevant for that individual. And then stepping down again is now CBD Isolate, which that is just pure CBD. CBD on its own will crystallize and form a crystalline structure. And so it can be isolated out of a crude oil extract of cannabis, of hemp extract, to get just pure CBD. And that is, of course, on the tier of efficacy, so to speak, that would, and again, this is from what the research suggests, is the least effective from a therapeutic perspective than broad spectrum. And then broad spectrum sits in between isolate and full spectrum as far as therapeutic value.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good explanation, and it can get very complicated, obviously. So for the consumer, like, is there any regulation yet around this, so that if I go and purchase a product, like, it's very clear what I'm getting in terms of the packaging and the descriptions and all that? What can I expect?
So that's yes. To answer your question, there is no official regulation dictating what is listed on the label outside of your typical. I mean, most people tend to follow general FDA labeling guidelines for their products. However, that's not even a guarantee because this industry is so unregulated still. You'll find. I mean, you come across some ridiculous stuff on labels, and so that's one of the main I guess issues or concerns a consumer should have as they enter into the CBD space is questions they should be asking whoever they're buying their products from are things like, what type of CBD is in your products? Do you have testing, potency testing, full panel testing to include things like pesticides, heavy metals, residual solvents, this sort of stuff? Do you have that information for the products I'm about to purchase? Stuff like that, just to establish some sort of legitimacy, I suppose. Ethical brands will provide that information, and so I don't mean to necessarily scare anybody by saying that the industry is so unregulated. Most brands, brands that you can trust will provide this information freely and publicly on their website, or if you reach out to them, they will provide
It almost reminds you of the supplement company, though. I mean, it is a little bit of the Wild West. And what I would always, tell people when looking at specific brands is, you want to start looking for specific verifications, right? Like organic verifications, non-GMO, NSF certified, informed choice. Like there's certain things in the supplement industry that when we're buying things like whey protein, I mean, do we really? It always cracks me up when I hear a trainer referring a specific product and they're like, oh, wow, this is great. And I'm like, well, how do you know? Like, how do I know? I know there's specific products that I recommend because I've actually been to factories and I've worked with companies where I've seen the vice president of a company flying down to South America to check out the farm where he's getting his organic coffee berry for in their energy and focus product, right? So when you start surrounding yourself with companies and you see a specific direction, I don't mess around. Like I'll turn around and I'll only hold on to those companies because there's been some, nightmarish stories of pre-workouts being sold with trace and finding traces of crystal meth in it, whether it was a decade ago or not. It happened. Or when they put that movie out called, was it Bigger, Faster, Stronger, and the guy shooting the documentary, I forgot his name. I know his name, but I forgot it. Actually put out a supplement where they used baking soda and flour, and he was like, "This is this industry that we're working in." But out of the CBD market, there are very few organic products. And it's like, okay, organic doesn't always mean that, the product does what it says it does. Like when someone buys an organic cookie, I'm like, a cookie's still a cookie, right? Like you could still buy an organic product and it can still put weight on you. But when you look at a company that's going after that organic verification, and they have to follow specific guidelines for them to be able to achieve that. And there are costs that are expensive. That really shows me that that company is, one, smarter. They're willing to, cut down on their margins to prove to people, hey, we're doing all we can in this market right now. Why are there so few companies, CBD companies out there that are organic products?
That's a good question, Don, and I that's actually a question I think about quite a lot. And I don't really have a solid answer for you. First off, everything you said, absolutely correct. Organic, the USDA organic stamp doesn't guarantee that the product you're getting with that stamp on it is going to be any better or worse than any other product, but it does represent a philosophy, so to speak, of from that company, from that brand that says, hey, we are concerned about things that maybe most other people aren't concerned about, because what's involved in getting that organic stamp, as you said, it is quite an involved process. It involves an annual certification and an annual inspection by the certifying bodies. It involves only being able to use specific ingredients, only sourcing those ingredients from specific sources. It's a whole chain of processes and protocols and I don't want to call it regulations. Maybe that's not the best word, but regulations in order to maintain that organic stamp. And so, again, as you said, there are very few brands doing it. Within this space specifically, the best answer I can give you is because they don't want to do the work, they don't want to spend the money. I'm sure it's a similar answer for outside of CBD and in general produce, for example. Why don't most agricultural providers go through the trouble to get organic vegetables, organic fruits, etc.? I'm sure the answers are very similar.
Yeah, we had this is a little tangent here, but we were interviewing a DEA agent who's a friend of mine last week, and that was very interesting. And he was going over like Schedule 1 versus Schedule 2 drugs. And I know you don't want to necessarily have an association with something like a marijuana product, but I had heard that there's some problems with research because marijuana is a Schedule 1. They can't research it as readily as they want to because of some of the restrictions around that. Have you found that with some of the research that you can't get the research you want because of some of these restrictions?
Yeah, I could actually speak to that pretty well. For years, I was working in a drug addiction lab, preclinical drug addiction lab, and we had DEA Schedule 1, 2, and 3 licenses. And so we had access to pretty much any drug you could imagine. Cannabis, even within Schedule 1 drugs, cannabis was extremely difficult to come by. We worked with various opiates, namely heroin. We worked with cocaine. We worked with all kinds of drugs, and we could get those no problem. Cannabis was very difficult to come by, specifically because of how the supply chain is set up. Supply chain is set up for sourcing the cannabis. Within research, if you have a Schedule 1 license as a lab, as a research lab, and you're looking to source cannabis, you can only source it from a couple of labs, government-sanctioned labs around the country. There's one in Mississippi, I believe, oddly enough, or maybe it was Louisiana, I forget where it is. But basically, there's only a couple government-sanctioned labs around the country that are legally allowed, federally legally allowed to grow cannabis, and they supply the cannabis for the entire country within the legally Schedule One regulated, academia research space. And it's kind of an aside. It's actually kind of funny. The quality of the cannabis that they grow relative to what's available in recreational markets now around the country, Colorado, California, is so bad that that people don't. So that's another reason people don't even want to use it, because it's not representative of cannabis that exists out on the marketplace today. So yeah, it's actually extremely difficult to source, and that leads to difficulty doing research on cannabis directly. And so what ends up happening within the space is you end up working with synthetic cannabinoids, cannabinoids that are created in the lab, other research compounds, research chemicals that are meant to mimic the activity of THC or CBD or another cannabinoid, for example. And that is usually how people do the research on cannabis-esque, the cannabis realm, is they go that route of just getting a synthetic compound that was made in some compounding lab, and they can get that no problem.
I was having a conversation with a few different surgeons out of a very well-known hospital in New York. And, the conversation was interesting because, in a way they sounded a lot like how you started off the conversation. They're like, well, legally I can't say this, but this is what we have been, this is what we have been finding. This is the feedback we've been getting. This is why I like it. And you're hearing this from a lot of different surgeons and orthopedists, especially many orthopedists that will just turn around, that I'm friendly with, that can't make a recommendation, but they're like, off the record, try CBD cream. You have all these doctors, every one of them I find are recommending it. Yet I feel like we still don't have anything concrete to be able to say, here's research. I mean, why is it taking so long for this stuff to get regulated? Why is it taking so long for people to put a doctor to put a paper out stating, listen, this is what we found? I've seen so many areas in fitness where there have been well-known strength coaches where 10 years later, they're saying things that are completely different, or nutritionists that are saying, like, listen, back in the 80s, saturated fat was suddenly, it was terrible. Don't go near saturated fat. And then, in the last decade, nutritionists now are recommending coconut oil and MCT oil. Well, back in the 80s, no one would have been having that. But now they're saying something completely different. It's like they're not getting criticized for that. People aren't getting, ridiculed for for giving advice 20, 30 years ago that they're finding out now is a little bit different. Why are we tiptoeing so much around this? Especially with something that's, CBD is not going to kill you. Like, have we had any, this is not like, we're not trying to regulate cocaine here or heroin. Like I've never heard anyone who's taken, and I'm not a THC guy. I've just never been into it. Like a couple cocktails here and there, fine. CBD, I'm getting into, but I've never actually heard of anyone getting into a bar fight or a car accident, or, being so impaired from being on CBD or even being on THC. So why is it, if it's not going to kill you, why aren't we able to put out research on it?
Right. Well, so that's the thing, is there more and more research is coming out, especially over the past 5 years or so. Cannabis is one of the most, research surrounding cannabis, whether it's behavioral research, whether it's pharmacokinetic research, whether it's, mechanistic research, it's one of the most heavily researched topics at the moment. If you look at number of published articles over time. So, that sentiment, while historically has been very true, is actually beginning to change as of recent years. And to answer the other part of your question, as far as why on the legality of it, and why, no progress has been made. Again, I can't really speak to definitively why that's the case. My personal thoughts on that matter are simply because there is so much interest on the opposite end of it. And so what I mean by that is big pharma, of course. You know, I think personally, I think big pharma, without trying to get too political here, I think big pharma is very afraid of what cannabis can do. And what that translates to is I think they're very afraid of how that will affect their profit margins
Yeah,
effectively.
but why not just jump on the bandwagon? Why doesn't big pharma, once the research comes out and it is conclusive that this
Right.
is a good thing, why can't they just start producing it and selling it like they do everything else?
So there's a few different facets to that question, and a few different levels of an answer, I guess, as well. Mainly, most generally, uh, far, the pharmaceutical industry, they operate on, you know, these drugs that they produce. They are pure compounds. You know, when you get ibuprofen, that is pure ibuprofen. When you get, you know, acetaminophen, that is pure acetaminophen. Cannabis is the exact antithesis of a pure compound. There are hundreds and hundreds of chemicals, compounds contained within the cannabis plant. And so simply the pharmaceutical industry cannot patent. You know, big pharma is all about IP and patenting their drugs and patenting that technology, so to speak. That is not possible with cannabis. It is known as what's known as a dirty drug, in that there is, you know, yes, there's THC and CBD. Those are the compounds of interest, but there are hundreds of other compounds contained within the cannabis plant that you could never, from a pharmaceutical perspective, and most of those compounds we don't even know about. We can't even really categorize them. From a pharmaceutical perspective, you can't patent something that you only know half the information on. You know, you can't say, okay, here's, you know, sour diesel flour. It contains, yeah, you can say it contains X amount of THC, X amount of CBD, whatever, but you're missing a big portion of the picture there. And from a pharmaceutical regulatory perspective, that's a no-no. And so that's probably the biggest reason. That being said, there are pharmaceutical companies out there that they're attempting to create cannabis, synthetic cannabis drugs that are purified compounds. And so there is one pharmaceutical company that has a patent on Sativex or Sativex, which is THC, a THC drug. Then they also have Epidiolex, which is a CBD drug. And so what they've done is they've basically created synthetic versions of these compounds, isolated them, and have basically patented that process and then patented that drug. And so pharma is attempting to do it. They just are still trying to figure out how they can do it, and whether it will even be successful. And I mean, the way it's been going for this one, GW Pharma is the pharmaceutical company I'm referring to. I believe they're based out of the UK. And they've been very successful with it. But, you know, for example, their drug, Epidiolex, the CBD drug, I believe that drug, it's effectively just CBD. It costs, I think, around $30,000 a year to receive that drug. Now, compare that to walking into a dispensary or even going online. You don't even have to walk into a dispensary anymore, depending on where you are, and buying a tincture or a topical cream or a mushroom powder, you know, for $30, $40, $50. And that lasts you, you know, an entire month or more. And so that's what, 100-fold reduction in cost. And a lot of times what you even find, you know, going back to what we were talking about earlier about full spectrum versus isolate, that product that you bought yourself tends to be more effective than these isolated compounds, which is what the research suggests. And so, I mean, again, I don't know their motivations as to why or why not, why they are pursuing or why they're not pursuing it. I just know that it's, you know, from a high level perspective, it's extremely difficult to get into a naturally occurring, naturally growing in the wild plant and take that and try to secure a patent on it. It's extremely difficult to do that.
So it's just not as profitable as some of the other projects they're doing, I assume.
Yeah, it's very profitable. I mean, their share price has gone up 2-3-fold since they've released these drugs. So I mean, yes, some people are finding success with it, but I think that's a very fortunately, I think for society at large, I think that's a very isolated case. And you know, I think that, you know, that's kind of the beauty of CBD, right? Is it's part of this larger philosophy of, you know, you don't, and again, this is just my personal thoughts on the matter. You don't have to go to the doctor and feel like you need to leave with a prescription for something, for anything that's wrong with you ever. You know, there are other ways to go about living your life and supplementing your life with naturally occurring products, compounds like CBD, that can improve that quality of life in similar ways, or even better ways in some cases, than going and giving yourself a prescription drug. Don, you're muted.
Sorry, guys. I got a war zone going on in my house right now. I'm trying to keep it quiet while you're speaking. But what's interesting about all this is that so CBD and THC, it's a compound from the cannabis plant, right? But for years, obviously, THC has been way more popularized than, even though it's been an illegal drug, but it not entirely, because it has been used for medical use, right? Cancer patients, et cetera. So, but then they pretty much found out that there's this additional compound in, you know, in the cannabis plant that we're finding has a lot of benefit to it, right? Is there any contradictory research right now, or is all the research pointing in one direction?
No, and that's a good point. There is contradictory research, of course. You know, and that speaks to what I mentioned at the beginning of the call, that CBD is not a miracle drug. It's not you know, it's not as if, you know, you shouldn't go into CBD and say, oh, I'm going to take this tincture, I'm going to rub this lotion on my arm, and it's going to fix all my problems. That's just not realistic. There definitely is contradictory research. You know, and again, this is digging deeper into the technical side of things. You know, depending specific subsets of people have to be very careful with CBD. You know, from a genetic perspective, from a contraindication if they're taking other medications perspective, for example. You know, for
I didn't know. I had no idea about that. I never
yeah,
heard.
yeah, and this population of people that's relevant for is relatively very minimal, but it
Right.
is still a potential concern. For example, a big one is if you're currently taking blood thinners, you do not want to be taking CBD products, because CBD effectively it messes with the enzymes that break down drugs in your body, and the specific it's a whole suite of enzymes that do this, but the specific ones that CBD affects has potentially harmful side effects if you're currently and actively taking blood thinners. So just an example. Another example would be if you are, so CBD has been found to be extremely effective in treating pediatric epilepsy, or just epileptic seizures, people with Dravet syndrome, another syndrome where you experience seizures. It's been found to be extremely effective, and that's kind of what popularized CBD in the first place. I'm sure most people, if they're familiar with CBD, are familiar with Charlotte's Web, and which of course is the brand that they provided CBD to this young girl Charlotte, who was having she was having dozens of seizures a week or on a daily basis. Pretty much had no quality of life. I mean, how can you if you're just constantly having a seizure all day? All of a sudden, she started taking CBD products, a tincture under her tongue, I believe, and her seizures went down to, they pretty much went away completely. And so now she can go out to the playground, play with her friends, go to school, have some sort of quality of life. Now, in that application specifically for treating seizures, for example, there is a Goldilocks window of efficacy. There's a range of efficacy, and you need to be cognizant of staying within that range, and that range obviously varies depending on each individual. But there have been cases, for example, where people they start taking CBD to treat their seizures start dropping. Over time, you develop a little bit of a tolerance to CBD. So they start upping their dose, and they keep upping their dose over time. Eventually, they get outside of that window for their personal therapeutic range, and all of a sudden, they start having more seizures. And so it's a very, very nuanced topic, and again, would go much deeper than the time we've got on this call. But just to give you a couple examples, it's not a miracle drug. It's not the end all be all to all problems in the world or all health problems. You do want to, it would be in anyone's best interest to do a little research before just blindly going into CBD, particularly if you're somebody that has specific health issues pre-existing.
Yeah, because I could see there being a problem with any type of substance where people are like, oh, this is really good. Then you're like seeing it in, oh, breakfast cereals, toothpaste. Like that does happen where like, hey, we're sprinkling it in everything. But from what you're saying, it might be good to have somebody help guide you on the precision of using this rather than just take it. Would you agree?
Yeah, I completely. And I'm in Colorado. There are physicians who are risking their medical licenses, so to speak. Not even, literally risking their medical licenses, and have stopped their traditional practices and are now exclusively treating people with, epilepsy or other types of diseases like this that with cannabis products. And so if you are somebody who has a pre-existing condition, has some sort of something serious like epilepsy or Dravet syndrome or something like that, there are certified healthcare professionals that exist that can help you, that would be able to help you, and would be personally would be the only people I would recommend to help you in those specific instances, than as opposed to just, as you say, Derek, just going and ordering a product and trying it out for yourself, because that can be potentially dangerous for the
or following somebody on Instagram. Right?
Right, exactly. That being said, for most people, and I would say most 85, 90% of people that are just looking for some pain relief or some anxiety relief or looking to help them sleep at night, you're most likely not going to have an issue. Again, my official recommendation is to consult your healthcare professional, of course, with all of this. But anecdotally speaking, most people are not going to have issues just picking up a tincture off the shelf or rubbing a topical lotion on their arm or on their leg or something. Most people are not going to have any issues whatsoever.
But we discussed earlier, and we didn't fully dive into it, but all CBD is not created equal. I mean, you're going into, specific, convenience stores, and
Gas
seeing,
stations.
gas stations, you're seeing
Right.
product on the shelf that's going for really, really, really cheap. And I think people out there, they don't realize that there's a different quality. So someone's trying to get into this right now. Someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, all right, this is interesting. I want to try it. What do you recommend as a whole? If you're like, well, not specifically saying, all right, well, go get one farm or not, not saying that directly, but what are some things that someone should look into when researching a company?
Right, right. So, yeah, I mean, anybody, regardless of whether you fall into the category of more casual use versus more therapeutic use, anybody, no matter what demographic you fall into, should be looking for when they're let's say you come across a brand, you go to their website, you're looking at their products. You should be looking for things like test results of each batch of product. You should be looking for things like, okay, what type of CBD is in these products? Full spectrum, broad spectrum, isolate, for example. You should be looking for whether they list the ingredients that they use in their products. Whether they include information about where they're sourcing their ingredients from. All this type of stuff. I mean, it's a similar approach to, I'm sure, how people go out and source supplements and vet supplements, pre-workouts or whey protein or something like that. Are they organic certified, USDA organic certified? Are they, do they do things like non-GMO, or, there's this thing called Leaping Bunny, which is no animal testing certification that certifies that you don't test on animals. This type of stuff.
Is it made overseas?
Yeah, exactly. Where that's actually a good point, Derek. Is what we find is it's not as just because the price of manufacturing has dropped significantly over the past couple of years, but there was a period of time a few years ago, while the price of CBD per gram was still so expensive, people were sourcing it from China. They were sourcing it from Eastern Europe. And what we were finding is a massive amount of heavy metals in their products, as well as residual solvents. And so that's something you just don't want to mess with, both of those instances. And so, another great question to ask, or to hopefully they provide it on their website, is where's all the stuff coming from? Where's the hemp coming from? Is it coming from a farm, here in Colorado or in Washington or whatever? Is it coming from overseas? Who does the processing? Who does the actual extraction of the material? Who does the manufacturing of the finished products? Is everything done in-house? Is it outsourced? All of these types of questions are extremely relevant and extremely important, I think, ultimately, as a consumer. If you're looking to get the best possible product for yourself, maybe you're getting it for your family, maybe you're getting it for your friends, whoever you're getting it for. Personally, these are all questions that I'd want to have answered before I say, hey, I'm going to go buy this product. I don't know anything about it, but I'm just going to start taking it. I'd like to have that information before I do that. So.
Well, I know that your guys' Instagram page has definitely become a favorite of mine. It's and for those people listening right now, it's One Farm by WAAYB. And the reason for this is I always like kind of getting a bit of education on what's going into this product. I mean, I remember you guys just formed a partnership with, I think it was Adaptations, which is a cinnamon farm in like Kona, Hawaii. It's an organic farm, and explaining about that was, to me was really interesting. Or which CBD delivery system is right for me? The oil, the soft gels, the topicals. It's like it's not, your page isn't about some sales and marketing piece to like try and sell product. It almost reminds me of the example I gave with the company Garden of Life, how the guy went down to the VP went down to South America to research the organic coffee berry. And that's when I recommend, clients, friends, when you're looking at a product, when you're looking at a supplement, you have to do a deep dive on this stuff. You can't just go and take what some influencer online is recommending. Because I'll be honest with you, 9 out of 10 times, if you ask them, well, how do you know? They're not really going to know. None of them do. Well, it tastes good. What the hell does that mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it actually doing the job that we are hoping or intending it to do? And for everyone out there listening to us right now, One Farm by WAAYB. Please give it a follow. Taylor, is there any other information on the company or you guys that you can pass along to our listeners?
Yeah. Just to do a little plug here. So, I don't think we explicitly covered it in the beginning of the call, but yeah, I work for One Farm. I do all of our formulations and run the lab and all of this type of stuff. And I mean, we recognize that all of this stuff that we've been talking about having integrity when you're going and offering products to people, getting things like USP Organic, sourcing your ingredients ethically. These are all things that we're concerned about because we believe we have a responsibility to the consumer, especially in this space, in the CBD space, where it is so Wild West still. We believe that we have the responsibility to elevate the industry from a products perspective, from a branding perspective, from a whatever perspective you're thinking about, and offer these things for consumers. I mean, the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues for consumers in this space is, especially in recent years, because the market has become so saturated with brands. I mean, it seems like a new brand is popping up every single day. Nobody knows who's legitimate. Nobody knows who to trust. Nobody knows, it's CBD is still kind of, on the fringe enough where relatively not a lot of people truly understand what CBD is or what types of questions they should even be asking when they're going to buy a CBD product or, any of these other things that we just talked about. And so, we believe that we should provide all of that for the consumer. And so, that's what we represent is we source all of our ingredients organically. All of our ingestible products are certified organic. They're all ethically sourced. Don, as you mentioned, we just found a really awesome farm in Hawaii to source our cinnamon from.
Right.
For our mushroom powder, we found a little collective of farmers in the Dominican Republic to source our cacao from for our mushroom powder. Things like this. We just found another supplier in Sri Lanka, again, a small supplier to source some of our other ingredients from. And so, we really just believe that it's worth the extra cost. It's worth the extra effort. It's worth everything if it means providing the consumer with the best possible quality product that we can.
And the education on it, which I think is it's so valuable. I mean, like I said, you don't feel like you're going to a sales page. Well, Taylor, listen, we can't thank you enough. I mean, it's been almost an hour already. I definitely want to get my man Derek some product for him to try out because I know he's gonna absolutely love it. And we're gonna let you know when we post this.
Awesome.
D?
Perfect.
Yeah, I want to get me some free range grass-fed cinnamon right away. So,
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Derek, thank you. Taylor, thank you. I thought that went awesome today. I'm super excited to put that up. And, you know, I'm going to connect Derek right now with Victor because I want to try and get him trying some stuff. Derek, I think, you know, you might benefit, you're going to benefit from it, but also
I'm so much older than you. I'll need it.
you're going to need more.
Yeah, yeah. If you just get me somehow your information, I'll send you a little care package, Derek. Don, your package should be getting there today.
Just arrived today.
Perfect.
Perfect. I'm gonna reach out to you and we'll figure out. I think we already went through the protocol, but I'm gonna pretty much start on that. I mean, I've been doing the mushroom powder in the morning, which I really like. So I think we said what about 30? Do we say 30 or 50 milligrams a day? I'm trying.
Yeah, between 30 and 50. I mean, again, you'll have to kind of play around with it and see what
Okay.
In that range. Yep.
Awesome, guys. Thanks a lot, Derek. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, and
Thanks,
we'll let
Taylor.
you know when this launches.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.